Thank you for being here today. For our Do Now, we were thinking about the Chicano civil rights movement of the 1960s and 70s. What do we already know about this? So, we've been spending a lot of time talking about um, African American rights, segregation, Martin Luther King, Black Power. That wasn't the only group in the 1960s that's going to be pushing for more equality. It's definitely the most famous. It was definitely the group that was most legally being oppressed, right? With segregation, there were a lot of systems in place specifically targeting African Americans, but they were not the only group fighting for power. Right? 1960s were this era of protest where people wanted to create change, that they were unhappy with the system and they wanted it to be better. So we talked about the protests in Vietnam. There's going to be a lot of protests for civil rights, not just for African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans, um, and also women are going to protest. We'll talk about women's rights next week. For the next few days, we're going to be talking about the Chicano civil rights movement. This is going to happen more in the late 60s and early 70s. But it's going to be a large movement for more equality for the people of Mexico, Central America, and Caribbean descent, people of more Hispanic descent, um, pushing for more equality in the United States. Now, it's different than African Americans is that you have people of lots of different ethnicities, lots of different backgrounds, cultural ideas, and values spread out over a large area. It's not as a united group as it was for African Americans, but there were still aspects of what they experienced that united their sort of movement and what they were pushing for. One of those things is going to be language. Most of these people in these different groups are the main language they are speaking is Spanish, and that is going to be the uniting factor that brings most of them together in order to push for more equality. So we need to understand sort of America's history with Hispanic immigrants, and up through like the 1960s, there were a lot of people of Hispanic descent living in the United States, mostly in the Southwest, like California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Colorado, right, those sorts of states. Um, and some of them had been there for generations, but a lot of um, Hispanic Americans weren't Americans. They were Mexican citizens who came across the border to work in the United States and went home when the work was done. They were typically farmers and they would cross the border back and forth. Often the border wasn't as well defended like it is today. It wasn't this big deal. People would cross, go to work, then go home in the winter, come back next spring to work again. They're called migrant workers or migrant farmers. Now, this allowed people to have more freedom to get more jobs and opportunity, but it also gave people the opportunity to oppress them, right, to be mistreated. They weren't American citizens, so they weren't always given the same rights and freedoms. Um, the farmers, the owners of the land, had a lot of power over these people. And as time went on, the number of migrant workers started to increase more and more to the point where immigration became an issue like it is today, where there's arguments about restricting immigration versus allowing more citizenship, lots of debate back and forth. But of the 1960s, a lot of the Hispanic Americans were on these small farms spread out, and they had very little power. And so they were being abused, being paid very little, being mistreated, lots of stuff like that. What's going to happen in the 1960s and 70s is there's going to be a young generation who are starting to move into cities, and they're going to start demanding change. They're going to be the leaders of this push, and they're going to be in cities, and it's going to be through schools that these young men and women don't feel like they're getting a fair access to education, that they're being oppressed and mistreated, not given rights once they're out of school, and that's where a lot of this movement's going to start. And this is going to include a push for more expression of their culture, language, their historical backgrounds, music, food, all this stuff to be more acceptable within society. There's some pictures of that movement. It will not be intimidated. You can see some of the artwork and references to Hispanic culture. They're protesting. with the eagle emblem, which is obviously important in Mexican culture. And here's one referencing Vietnam. Our fight is at home, not in Vietnam. We don't need to go fight another country. We got problems right here we need to solve. So we'll watch a video about the Chicano Civil Rights Movement. You can pause this one while we watch. Now, there's going to be lots of important leaders that are involved in this movement. There's going to be a lot of places that are important. When we talked about African Americans, we had Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and they tended to be in the South, like Alabama, Georgia, or major cities like New York and Detroit. Well, a lot of the Hispanic civil rights movement is going to happen in the West. Right? So it's going to happen on small farms, and the cities where it happens are going to be cities like Los Angeles, San Antonio, and also Denver. Denver is going to play a big role in the Chicano civil rights movement. And this is one of the leaders of the movement, Corky Gonzalez. He is going to be from Denver, so we'll watch a video about him as well. Today's activity, we're going to be reading and analyzing different important moments and leaders within the Chicano civil rights movement, and thinking about cause and effect a lot as we answer our questions.